I remember the exact weight of the grocery bags in my hands that night, the way the cheap plastic handles were digging into my palms, leaving those deep red lines that would take an hour to fade. It was just after 9, and I'd cut out of the work happy hour early because I'd promised my best friend Marcus that I'd pick up a six-pack on the way home. He was crashing on my couch, had been for about 3 weeks ever since his world had fallen apart in that spectacularly quiet way that only happens when you discover your fiancé has been embezzling from the joint account to fund a lifestyle you never even knew she was living. I remember thinking about him as I walked up the steps to our building, feeling a weird mix of pity and annoyance. I loved the guy, I really did. We'd known each other since college, back when we were both just idiots with dreams and a shared love for terrible pizza and worse decisions. He'd been my best man at my wedding to Laura, and I'd been his, that whole disastrous affair a year ago that ended with him staring at a bank statement and a series of Venmo transactions to a personal trainer he'd never met. So when he'd shown up on my doorstep with a duffel bag and that hollow look in his eyes, I didn't even hesitate. My wife Laura had been less enthusiastic. She'd smiled, of course, because Laura always smiles. It's one of the things I used to love most about her, that impeccable, graceful social veneer that made everyone feel comfortable. But I'd caught the slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible way her posture shifted when I'd said, "He can stay as long as he needs." That was 3 weeks ago. The couch was now perpetually covered in a blanket and a pillow, the coffee table cluttered with his laptop and scattered papers from his new half-hearted job hunt. It wasn't an ideal situation. Laura and I had just bought this place, a 2-bedroom condo in a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and polished concrete. It was our sanctuary, our first real statement as a married couple, and now it felt crowded, not just physically but emotionally. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before, a subtle shift in the gravitational pull of our home that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I'd convinced myself it was just the stress of having a guest, the natural friction of a third person in a space designed for two. I told myself that Laura was just being sensitive, that her need for order and privacy was being tested, and that it would all go back to normal as soon as Marcus got back on his feet. The key turned in the lock with that familiar soft click, and I nudged the door open with my hip. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable silence of an empty apartment, but a heavy, expectant silence like the air right before a thunderstorm. The TV wasn't on. Marcus wasn't on the couch, scrolling through his phone or making one of his overly complicated smoothies in the blender. The apartment smelled different too. It was a subtle thing. Underneath the usual scent of the citrus candle Laura always burned, there was something else, something musky and foreign like a stranger's cologne. "Hey man, I started, my voice cutting through the quiet as I kicked the door shut behind me. I stopped mid-sentence. My eyes had adjusted to the dimly lit living room and I saw the shape of a person on the couch, but it wasn't Marcus. It was a woman. She was sitting up, her back to me, her hair a cascade of dark waves that I would have recognized anywhere. It was Laura. She had her phone in her hand and she was scrolling through it with a frantic, jerky motion that was completely at odds with her usual serene composure. My heart started to pound against my ribs, not with anger, not yet, but with a sudden, sharp spike of adrenaline. It was a primitive feeling, the feeling of a cornered animal sensing a threat. "Laura," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She didn't turn around. She just froze, her hand hovering over the screen. The silence stretched, becoming thicker, more suffocating. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, the question feeling stupid and essential all at once. She finally turned her head, but she didn't look at me. She looked at the floor, her profile illuminated by the pale blue glow of her phone. She swallowed, a visible movement in her throat. He went to get some food," she said. Her voice was high, a little shaky, a tone I'd only ever heard from her when she was trying to hide something. It was the voice she used when she was telling me she hadn't bought those expensive shoes, even though I could see the box in the closet. It was the voice that always meant a lie was about to follow. I put the grocery bags down on the hallway table, my movements slow and deliberate. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything else out of place. The blanket from the couch was crumpled on the floor, the pillows were arranged differently, and then I saw it. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. That was odd. Marcus had been sleeping on the couch, not in the guest room, which was a room Laura and I used as an office. He'd never once been in there. I walked towards the sound of my own breathing, which was getting louder in my ears. I didn't ask Laura again. I just moved, my body acting on an instinct that my brain hadn't even had time to process yet. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, but the city lights from the window cast long, distorted shadows. Marcus was standing in the middle of the room, his back to me. He was shirtless, his shoulders pale and broad. He was fumbling with his belt buckle, his movements clumsy and panicked. He hadn't heard me. The air in this room was different too. It was charged, heavy with the scent of sweat and something else, something unmistakably intimate. A jacket was thrown over the back of the desk chair. It was Laura's. I stared at it, the pink cashmere I'd bought her for Valentine's Day, and the reality of what I was seeing finally began to click into place, not with a bang but with the sickening, slow slide of a knife between my ribs. His belt buckle clinked. I could see the tension in his back, the way his muscles were clenched tight, and then he spoke, his voice low and rough, a voice I'd never heard him use before. Is she gone? I think I left my shirt in the hall. The sound of his voice brought a wave of cold clarity, washing away the disbelief and replacing it with a searing, incandescent rage that started in my gut and spread through my chest like a chemical fire. It was a visceral, physical thing. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my knuckles white. A sound escaped my lips, a low, guttural sound that wasn't quite a word, but it was enough. It was enough to make him freeze. He didn't turn around, he just stopped. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, like a puppeteer had cut his strings. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant, muffled sound of a siren wailing down on the street below. I stood there in the doorway of my own office, in the home I'd built with the woman I'd loved for 6 years, and I stared at the back of my best friend. The man I'd let into my life, my home, my sanctuary. The man who had been the best man at my wedding, the man who had cried with me when my father died, the man I'd trusted with everything I had. And my wife. My Laura, with her perfect smile and her carefully constructed world of order and grace. She was out in the living room, probably still scrolling through her phone, trying to concoct some plausible story to explain why my best friend was shirtless in our guest room with her jacket draped over the chair. The betrayal wasn't just the sex. It wasn't even the act of it. It was the casual, almost practiced ease of it, the way he had asked if she was gone. The way they had orchestrated this in my own home, under my own roof, while I was out buying him beer because I felt sorry for him. It was the sheer, staggering disrespect of it. The fact that they thought they could get away with it. That they thought I was too blind, too trusting, too stupid to see what was right in front of my face. And the most sickening part of all, the thought that clawed at my insides like a living thing, was the realization that this wasn't the first time. The tension in the apartment, the subtle shifts in their behavior, the way Laura had been so eager to get me out of the house for happy hour. It all made a horrible, perfect sense now. Marcus finally turned. His face was a mask of guilt and fear, a messy combination of 1,000 different emotions he was failing to hide. His eyes were wide, his jaw slack. He took a tentative step towards me, his hands raised slightly as if he were trying to calm a wild animal. "Jake, man, it's not what it looks like," he said. The words sounded hollow, a cliché straight out of a bad movie. It was the lamest, most pathetic thing he could have possibly said. I didn't respond, I couldn't, my throat was too tight, all I could see was red, a pulsing, living red that filled my vision. From the hallway behind me I heard her, Laura's voice, small and shaking. "Jake, please let me explain." I turned my head slowly, my neck feeling stiff and wooden. She was standing in the hallway now, her phone clutched to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide and she was crying. Real tears, not the delicate, perfect ones she perfected for social media, but messy, panicked ones that streaked her mascara down her cheeks. She looked terrified. Good, she should be. I looked back at Marcus. He was putting his shirt back on, the movements clumsy and desperate, like he could somehow undo what had just happened by covering up. He was saying something else, a frantic stream of excuses about how it was a mistake, how it had just happened, how he was in a bad place. I heard the words, but they didn't register. They were just noise, a buzzing in my ears that was competing with the roar of my own blood. I took a step back, away from them both. My mind was a battlefield. The part of me that was still Jake, the husband, the friend, was screaming in denial, desperately trying to rewind the last 5 minutes. But the other part, the part that had just been born in the heart of a crisis, was already packing its bags. It was cold and clinical, cataloging the facts, assessing the damage, and plotting an exit. This wasn't just a crack in the foundation. The foundation was gone. Everything I had built, everything I had believed in was ashes. My marriage, my friendship, my own sense of self, it was all a carefully constructed lie, and the two people who had held the blueprints were standing right in front of me. I didn't scream, I didn't punch a wall, I didn't even raise my voice. That was the part that scared me the most, the cold, detached calm that settled over me like a second skin. I just stood there in the doorway of my own guest room, my eyes flicking between my wife and my best friend, and I felt something inside me break, not with a crash, but with a clean, surgical snap. It was the sound of a bone breaking in a quiet room. You don't hear the crack, you just feel the wrongness of it. That's what this was. A wrongness I would never be able to unfeel. Marcus had finished buttoning his shirt. He looked smaller now, somehow deflated. The confidence he'd carried his whole life, the easy swagger of a guy who'd never had to fight for anything, was gone. In its place was just a man, a pathetic, sorry excuse for a man staring at me with his mouth hanging open, waiting for me to do something, to explode, to cry, to give him something he could react to, but I didn't give him that. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The rage was there, a living thing coiled in my chest, but I had a leash on it. A short, frayed leash, but a leash nonetheless. Laura was still crying in the hallway, her shoulders shaking with these loud, gulping sobs that I knew were supposed to make me feel sorry for her. She was good at that. She was so good at being the victim. I remembered the way she'd looked at me 6 months ago when her mother had called her a failure for quitting her corporate job to start her little Etsy business. She had crumbled and I had held her, told her she was brave, that I believed in her. I had been her soft place to land. And now I knew with a certainty that was as sharp as broken glass that while I had been her soft place, she had been using that softness to cushion her falls into someone else's arms. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper. How long? They both flinched. Marcus looked at Laura, his eyes begging for help. She looked back at him, her mascara-streaked face a mess of indecision and panic. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the distant thrum of the city outside. It was like we were all frozen in a tableau of betrayal, a painting of a marriage on the brink of collapse. Laura was the first to break. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out towards me. Jake, it doesn't matter how long. What matters is that I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. I took a step back. Her hand fell limply to her side. Don't, I said, the word coming out harsher than I intended. Don't you dare touch me. Don't you dare say that word to me right now. Marcus cleared his throat. Man, I think we all just need to take a minute. This is all my fault. I was in a bad place and she was just trying to help me and one thing led to another and— Shut up, I said, my eyes cutting to him. I saw him flinch again and for a moment I felt a flicker of satisfaction. It was a dark, petty feeling, but I held on to it. It was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I don't want to hear your excuses. You don't get to make excuses. You were in a bad place, so you decided to fuck my wife. In my house, you're not a victim here. You're not the sad, broken guy who made a mistake. You're a snake, that's all you are. That's all you've ever been, and I was just too goddamn stupid to see it. I could hear the words coming out of my mouth, but it felt like I was watching a scene from a movie. The guy who was supposed to be me was saying all the right things, hitting all the right notes of righteous anger. But underneath it, there was a void, a hollow, empty space where all the love and trust and friendship used to be. It was like someone had taken a melon baller to my soul and scooped out everything that made me feel human. Laura was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. Jake, please, please look at me. I know I messed up. I know I did something unforgivable, but you have to understand. We've been drifting apart for months. You're never home. You're always working late, and when you are home, you're staring at your phone or your laptop. I felt invisible. I felt like I didn't exist. I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound that scraped the inside of my throat. So you felt invisible, and the solution was to have sex with my best friend? That was your big plan, to make me feel what? Jealous? Guilty? Because I can guarantee you, Laura, the only thing I feel right now is disgust. Disgust with you, disgust with him, and disgust with myself for ever trusting either one of you. Marcus took a step towards me, his hands up. He had a look on his face like he was trying to reason with a hostage taker. Jake, listen, you're right. You're completely right. I'm a piece of shit. I know I am, but Laura and I, we have something real. It just happened. It's not like we planned it. It's not like we wanted to hurt you. I stared at him. I stared at him so hard I saw his soul, and what I saw was empty. He was a man so terrified of his own loneliness that he'd crawl into anyone's bed just to feel something, and he'd chosen mine. He'd chosen to take my wife in my house on my dime while I was out buying him beer. Get out, I said. My voice was flat, empty. What? Marcus blinked. Get the fuck out of my apartment, I said louder this time. I want you out right now. Take your stupid duffel bag and your pathetic life and get the hell out of my house. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I cut him off with a look. It was a look I'd never given anyone before. It was the look of a man who had been pushed past his breaking point and was holding on by the thinnest thread. He must have seen it because he nodded, his face pale. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, almost tripping over his own feet as he scrambled out of the room. He didn't look at me as he passed. He just walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floors, and disappeared into the living room. I heard the sound of him fumbling with his bag, the clatter of his stuff being shoved inside. Laura was still standing in the hallway, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. She was watching me with those big, brown eyes, the same eyes I'd fallen in love with 6 years ago at a shitty dive bar in Brooklyn. I had been a mess back then, fresh off a failed engagement, nursing a whiskey and trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. She had walked up to me and said, "You look like you need a friend." And I had believed her. I had believed she was the kindest person I'd ever met. Now I knew better. She wasn't kind. She was just skilled at making people think she was kind. It was a talent, a carefully honed craft, and I'd been her biggest mark. Jake, can we please just talk? Her voice was barely a whisper. You don't have to decide anything tonight. You don't have to forgive me. Just let me explain. Let me tell you what happened from my side. You owe me that much. I turned to look at her. I owe you. I shook my head, a slow, disbelieving shake. I don't owe you a goddamn thing. You owe me an explanation that makes any of this make sense, but I don't think you have one, do you, Laura? Because there's no explanation. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, 1,000 choices. Every time you texted him, every time you stayed late, every time you lied about where you were going, you made a choice, you chose him. And now you have to live with that. She was crying again, but I was done feeling sorry for her. I walked past her into the living room. Marcus was standing by the door, his duffel bag over his shoulder. His face was a mask of misery, and I wanted to punch it. I wanted to punch it so badly my knuckles were itching, but I didn't. I kept my hands at my sides, my fists clenched so tight my nails were digging into my palms. You staying in town? I asked him. He looked confused. What? Because if you're staying in town, I want to know. I want to know so I can avoid you. I want to know so I can walk down the street without seeing your stupid face and having to relive this moment over and over again. He swallowed hard. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, think about it, I said, my voice cold. Because if you ever come near me again, if you ever try to contact me, if you ever so much as look at me from across the street, I will make your life a living hell. I will call your boss. I will call your mother. I will tell everyone we know what you did. You will become a cautionary tale, Marcus. You will be the guy who destroyed a marriage and a friendship because you couldn't keep it in your pants. I will destroy you. Do you understand me? He nodded, his face pale. Yeah, I understand. Good, now get out. He opened the door and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound was so final, so definitive. It was the sound of a chapter closing, but it wasn't the end. I knew that. This was just the beginning of something much darker, much more complicated. I turned back to Laura, who was still standing in the hallway, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling. I walked past her into the bedroom. I started pulling clothes out of the dresser, throwing them into a duffel bag. She followed me, her voice a frantic, pleading whisper. Jake, what are you doing? Where are you going? I'm leaving, I said, not looking at her. I'm going to stay with my sister. I need to think. Please don't leave, she said, grabbing my arm. Please, we can fix this. We can work through this. I love you. I've always loved you. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then I looked up at her face. Her eyes were red and swollen, her nose running. She was a mess. She was beautiful even now, but I couldn't see it. All I could see was the lie, the years and years of lies. Did you ever love me? I asked. The question came out before I could stop it. It was the question that had been gnawing at me since I'd walked through that door. The question that I needed to know the answer to, even if it destroyed me. She looked shocked. Of course I loved you. I still love you. This doesn't change that, doesn't it? I said, my voice cracking for the first time. Doesn't it change everything? Because I look at you now, Laura, and I don't see the woman I married. I see a stranger. I see someone who was capable of lying to my face for months. I see someone who had sex with my best friend in our home and then went to sleep next to me. I see someone who kissed me goodbye this morning and told me she loved me, and I believed her. I believed every word, and now I don't know what was real and what wasn't. I don't know if anything in our marriage was ever real. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. It was real, I swear to you, Jake, it was real. I made a terrible mistake. I was weak. I was lonely, and Marcus was there. He was hurting too. We connected in a way I never expected. It just happened. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I want to lose you. Too late, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. You already lost me. I zipped up the duffel bag and walked out of the bedroom. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door, my wallet from the table. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I would see her face and I would weaken. And I couldn't afford to weaken. Not now, not ever again. The door slammed shut behind me, and I stood in the hallway of my own building, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and I felt completely, utterly alone. The walls of the hallway seemed to close in on me, and I leaned against them, my forehead resting against the cool paint, and I tried to breathe. But the air wouldn't come. It was like my lungs had forgotten how to work. I thought about my dad. My dad, who had died 5 years ago, who had been the only person in my life who had ever really understood me. He'd had a saying. He used to say it to me all the time when I was a kid, when I was struggling with something or feeling sorry for myself. He would sit me down, look me in the eye, and say, son, the world doesn't owe you a thing. It's a hard, cold place. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be. I'd never really understood that until this moment. Standing in the hallway of my own building, my marriage in ruins, my friendship ash in my mouth, I finally understood what he meant. The world didn't owe me anything, not happiness, not love, not trust, not even an explanation. The world just was, and I had to find my own way through it. I pushed off the wall and walked to the elevator. I pressed the button and the doors slid open. I stepped inside, and as the doors closed in front of me, I thought about all the things I'd have to do, all the hard conversations, all the legal battles, all the sleepless nights. It was overwhelming, it was paralyzing, but I didn't have a choice. I had to move forward, I had to survive this. The elevator descended to the lobby, and I walked out into the cool night air. The city was alive around me, the lights of the buildings stretching up into the sky like fingers reaching for something they could never touch. It was beautiful and indifferent, and for a moment I felt a strange sense of peace. I was just one person in a city of millions, one broken heart in a sea of broken hearts. I wasn't special. I wasn't unique. I was just another guy who had been betrayed by the two people he trusted most. And I was going to get through it, one day at a time, one step at a time, even if it killed me. The first 3 days at my sister's place were a blur of stale coffee and sleepless nights. I barely left the guest room. I'd lie on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it made its slow, hypnotic revolutions, and I'd replay the scene over and over again like a broken record. The way Marcus's back had looked in the dim light. The sound of his belt buckle. The way Laura had said my name, that pleading, desperate tone that was supposed to make me forget everything I'd just seen. It didn't work, nothing worked. My brain was a trap, and I was the mouse caught inside it, running the same maze over and over, looking for a way out that didn't exist. My sister, Rachel, was the only person I could tolerate being around, and even that was a stretch. She was 5 years older than me, a high school English teacher with the kind of practical, no-nonsense attitude that had always annoyed me when we were kids but now felt like a lifeline. She didn't coddle me. She didn't tell me everything was going to be okay. She just made sure I had food in my stomach and a place to sleep, and she gave me the space I needed to fall apart. She was the only person who didn't need to hear the details. She knew me too well. She could see the betrayal written all over my face, in the dark circles under my eyes, and the way my hands shook when I tried to hold a cup of coffee. She didn't push, she just waited. The first time I looked at my phone was on the fourth day. I'd been avoiding it, letting it sit on the nightstand like a ticking time bomb. It had buzzed and pinged incessantly for the first 24 hours, a constant stream of texts from Laura and Marcus, each one more desperate and pathetic than the last. I'd read a few of them in the beginning. "Please call me, I'm so sorry, I can't live without you." That was Laura. "I know I fucked up, I'm a terrible person, I'll do anything to make this right." That was Marcus. I deleted them all without responding. I didn't have the energy for their apologies. Their words were just noise, a cacophony of self-pity that did nothing to change the fact that they had destroyed everything I had ever believed in. But on the fourth day, I finally picked up the phone. I scrolled through the messages, my thumb moving mechanically over the screen. There were dozens of them, a digital trail of their collective guilt. And then I saw it, a text from Laura that had come in late the night before while I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. "I know you probably hate me right now, and you should. What I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know one thing. You asked me if anything in our marriage was ever real. The answer is yes. Most of it was real. I made a terrible mistake. But I'm not a monster. I'm a person who got lost. I'm begging you, Jake, please don't give up on us." I read the message 3 times. Each time it made me angrier. The audacity of her to sit there and try to rewrite history, to paint herself as some lost soul who had stumbled into an affair, when the reality was that she had made a conscious choice over and over again to lie to me. She had looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while she was planning her next rendezvous with my best friend. She had kissed me goodbye and then gone to him. She had let me buy her flowers and take her out to dinner and make love to her, all while she was giving a part of herself to someone else. And then it hit me, the most devastating thought of all. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It was that she had let me believe in something that wasn't true. She had let me build a life on a foundation of lies, and now that the foundation was cracked, the whole thing was crumbling, and I was left standing in the rubble trying to figure out which way was up. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I needed to know if there was more. I needed to know if this was just one affair or if there had been others. I needed to know if the woman I had married was the same woman I had thought I knew, or if she had been a stranger all along. Rachel knocked on the door. "Jake, you need to eat something." Her voice was gentle but firm. It was the voice she used on her students when they were slacking off. "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice hoarse. "Tough," she said. "You need to eat. You've barely had anything in 4 days." I made soup. I sighed, running a hand through my greasy hair. I hadn't showered in 2 days. I hadn't shaved. I looked like a homeless man, and I felt like one too, but I knew she was right. I couldn't just hide in this room forever. At some point, I had to face the world again. I had to face my life. I dragged myself out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Rachel was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of tomato soup. She looked up when I came in, her eyes scanning my face with that sharp, assessing look she'd mastered over the years. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks," I said, slumping into a chair at the small kitchen table. She brought me a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. "Eat," she said, "then we need to talk." I picked up the spoon and took a bite. The soup was hot and salty, and it felt good going down. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. I ate the whole bowl in a few minutes, and then I sat back, feeling the warmth spread through my body. It was the first time in days I'd felt anything close to human. Rachel sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "So," she said, "what are you going to do?" I shrugged. "I don't know, get a divorce, I guess. It's over. I can't go back to that. I can't look at her and not see what she did." Rachel nodded slowly. "And Marcus, are you going to do anything about him?" I was quiet for a long moment. The thought of Marcus filled me with a cold, simmering rage that I'd been trying to keep buried. He was supposed to be my best friend. He was supposed to be the one person I could count on, the one person who would never betray me, and he had done exactly that. He had taken everything I had and thrown it in the trash. "I don't know," I said finally. "Part of me wants to kill him, part of me wants to ruin his life the way he ruined mine, but another part of me just wants to forget he ever existed. I don't know which one is stronger." Rachel reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "You don't have to figure it all out today, just take it one day at a time, that's all you can do." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I was lucky to have her. I was lucky to have someone who didn't judge me, who didn't ask me to explain myself. But even with her support, I felt profoundly alone. I felt like I was floating in a vast, empty ocean with no land in sight and no way to navigate. I spent the next 2 weeks trying to piece my life back together. I went back to work, but it was a struggle. I was a graphic designer at a mid-size agency, and my job required creativity and focus. I had neither. I stared at my computer screen for hours, my mind blank, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. My boss, a guy named Dave who had always been decent to me, pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if I was okay. I told him I was going through some personal stuff. He nodded, said he understood, and told me to take as much time as I needed. It was a kindness I didn't deserve, but I took it anyway. I also started looking for a new place to live. I couldn't go back to the apartment Laura and I had shared. The thought of walking through those doors, of seeing her face, of sleeping in that bed, made me want to vomit. I started browsing rental listings online, looking for something small and cheap, a place I could afford on my own. It was a humbling experience. I'd always prided myself on being a provider, on being the one who took care of things. Now I was starting from scratch and it felt like a failure. One night I was sitting on the fire escape of Rachel's apartment, a cigarette dangling from my fingers. I didn't usually smoke, but I'd started in the days after the discovery. It was a stupid habit, a crutch, but it gave me something to do with my hands. I was staring out at the city, at the lights of the buildings stretching into the distance when my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was Laura. "Please come home. I can't do this alone. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. I thought about ignoring it, deleting it like I'd deleted all the others, but something stopped me. A part of me, the part that still loved her, the part that was still desperately clinging to the memory of who we used to be, wanted to hear what she had to say. I knew it was a bad idea. I knew it would only make things worse. But I couldn't help myself. I was a moth and she was a flame, and I was drawn to her even though I knew I would get burned. I texted her back, "Fine, I'll come tomorrow, but I'm not staying long." She replied almost instantly, "Thank you, that's all I'm asking." The next day I took the train back to the apartment. The ride was agonizing. Every mile that brought me closer to her felt like a step towards the guillotine. I kept telling myself I was doing this for closure, that I needed to see her one last time, to say all the things I hadn't said, to make it real and final. But deep down, I knew I was just torturing myself. I knew I was walking into a trap, and I was walking into it with my eyes wide open. When I got to the building, I stood outside for a few minutes, staring at the door. I remembered the first time I'd walked through that door when we'd just bought the place. Laura had been so excited. She'd run from room to room, her laughter echoing off the walls, talking about all the things we were going to do to make it our home. We'd spent months renovating it, painting the walls, picking out furniture. It had been a labor of love, and now it was just a building, a shell, a hollow reminder of everything I'd lost. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The elevator ride was a blur. When I got to the door, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I finally got the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was clean, too clean. It looked like Laura had spent the entire morning scrubbing every surface, making it spotless. It was her way of trying to control the chaos, I realized. She was a woman who needed order, and the disorder she had created was driving her crazy. She was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, older than I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a vulnerability in her posture that I'd never seen before. "Jake," she said, standing up. Her voice was shaky. "Thank you for coming." I didn't say anything. I just walked over and sat down on the armchair across from her. I didn't want to be near her. I didn't want to touch her. I kept my distance, my arms crossed over my chest. She sat back down on the couch, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I don't even know where to start," she said. "Start at the beginning," I said. "How did it start?" She took a deep breath. "It started a few weeks after Marcus moved in. He was so broken, Jake. He was in so much pain. And I just wanted to help him. I was trying to be a good person. I was trying to be the kind of friend you needed me to be." "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't pretend like you did this out of the goodness of your heart. You did it because you wanted to. You had sex with him because you wanted to have sex with him. There was nothing noble about it. Don't try to make it into something it wasn't." She flinched. "Okay, you're right. That wasn't the truth. The truth is I was lonely. I was lonely, and he was there, and he made me feel seen. He made me feel like I mattered. It was wrong. I know it was wrong, but it felt good. It felt so good." I felt a stab of pain in my chest. "And what did I make you feel? Did I make you feel invisible?" "No," she said quickly. "No, Jake, it wasn't you, it was me. I was so caught up in my own unhappiness that I couldn't see what I had. I took you for granted. I took everything for granted, and now it's too late, and I hate myself for it." She started to cry, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched her, a strange, disconnected feeling washing over me. I was supposed to be angry, I was supposed to be heartbroken, and I was, but there was something else too, something that felt almost like pity. She was so broken, so desperate, and there was nothing I could do to fix her. She had to fix herself, but I didn't think she could. I didn't think she had the strength. "Were there others?" I asked. The question came out of nowhere, but I needed to know. I needed to know if this was the only time or if my whole marriage had been a lie. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "No, of course not. There were no others. Marcus was the only one." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just a terrible mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. But the doubt was there, a small nagging voice in the back of my head. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever look at her and not wonder what she was hiding? Laura, I said, my voice low, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She reached out her hand, and for a moment I wanted to take it. I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her everything was going to be okay, but I didn't. I just sat there frozen, watching her. Please, Jake, she said, please don't give up on us. We can get through this. I know we can. We just need time. But time wasn't the problem. The problem was that I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I had married was gone, replaced by a stranger I didn't recognize, and I wasn't sure I wanted to meet her. I walked out of that apartment with my heart in my throat and a hollow feeling in my chest that I knew would take years to fill. Laura's words echoed in my head as I rode the elevator down, her desperate pleas for forgiveness blending with the hum of the machinery. She had laid herself bare, stripped away every defense, and shown me the raw, ugly truth of who she was. And the hardest part was that I still loved her. Even after everything, even after the lies and the betrayal and the shattered trust, a part of me still loved the woman I had married. But love wasn't enough. It had never been enough. Love was just the thing that made the pain cut deeper. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and legal consultations. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a part of town I'd never lived in before, a neighborhood of narrow streets and old buildings that felt more like a temporary holding cell than a home. I signed the lease, bought a mattress and a few pieces of cheap furniture from a discount store, and tried to convince myself that this was the beginning of a new chapter. But every night I lay in bed staring at the unfamiliar ceiling and I felt like I was suffocating. The silence was too loud, the space was too empty. There were no echoes of Laura's laughter, no traces of her scent on the pillows, just me and my thoughts, and they were the worst company I'd ever kept. I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that kept me from spiraling completely out of control. I took on extra projects, worked late into the night, and volunteered for assignments that no one else wanted. My boss, Dave, noticed my sudden burst of productivity but didn't ask questions. He just nodded and gave me more work. I think he sensed that I needed the distraction, that the chaos of deadlines and client demands was the only thing keeping me from drowning in my own misery. And he was right. When I was working, I didn't have to think about Laura. I didn't have to think about Marcus. I didn't have to think about the life I'd lost. I could just focus on pixels and layouts and color palettes, on the small, manageable problems that had nothing to do with the gaping wound in my chest. But the thoughts always came back. They crept in during the quiet moments, in the space between one task and the next, when my mind was unguarded and my defenses were down. I'd be walking down the street and see a couple holding hands or hear a song that reminded me of our wedding, and I'd feel that familiar stab of pain. It was like a phantom limb, the ghost of a love that was no longer there. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her or thinking about something I wanted to tell her, and then I'd remember and the loss would hit me all over again. It was a grief that didn't follow any rules, a mourning process that had no clear beginning or end. I avoided Marcus like the plague. I blocked his number, unfollowed him on social media, and made a conscious effort to stay away from the places I knew he frequented. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to hear his voice. I wanted to erase him from my memory, to pretend that we had never been friends, that he had never existed. But it wasn't that easy. He was woven into the fabric of my past, a thread that couldn't be pulled out without unraveling the whole tapestry. Every memory of college, every inside joke, every shared triumph and failure was now tainted by the knowledge of what he had done. He had poisoned my past, and there was no antidote. One night, about a month after I moved into my new apartment, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was Marcus. His voice was strained, heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Jake, I know you don't want to talk to me," he said, "and I get it, I totally get it, but I need to tell you something you need to know." I should have hung up. I should have told him to go to hell and ended the call, but I didn't. The old habit of listening, of giving him the benefit of the doubt, was too ingrained. "What?" I said, my voice flat. "Laura called me," he said. "She told me you're getting a divorce. She told me she's falling apart. She told me she's been drinking, that she's barely leaving the apartment. She said she's scared she's going to do something stupid." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't seen Laura in weeks, hadn't talked to her beyond the brief, clinical conversations about splitting assets and signing papers. I'd assumed she was handling it the way she handled everything else, with a smile and a carefully constructed facade of control. The thought of her falling apart, of her drinking alone in that apartment, was almost too much to bear. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because I can't handle it," he said. "I can't handle watching her destroy herself. I know I'm the last person who should be saying this, but she needs help, Jake. She needs someone who actually cares about her. She needs you." I laughed, a bitter hollow sound. "She needs me, that's rich. She had me, Marcus. She had me and she threw me away, and you helped her do it, so don't you dare call me and try to make me feel guilty for her mistakes. That's not how this works." "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. I'm a piece of shit. I know I am, but I'm telling you this because I can't live with myself if something happens to her. I already can't live with myself. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I think about what I did every single day and I hate myself for it. but that's not her fault. She's not a bad person, Jake. She just made a really, really terrible mistake. I was quiet for a long moment. The anger was still there, burning beneath the surface, but it was tempered by something else, something that felt dangerously like compassion. I didn't want to care. I didn't want to be the one who saved her, but I couldn't just let her drown. Where is she? I asked finally. She's at the apartment. She hasn't left in 3 days. I've been checking on her, bringing her food, but she won't talk to me. She just stares at the wall and drinks. She's in a bad place, Jake, a really bad place. I hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in the middle of my small, empty apartment, my heart pounding in my chest, and I tried to figure out what to do. The logical part of me, the part that had been building walls around my heart for weeks, told me to stay away, to let her deal with her own consequences, to focus on my own healing. But there was another part, the part that had loved her, that had built a life with her, that couldn't just walk away. It was the part that made me pick up my keys and head out the door. The drive to the apartment was a blur. I don't remember making the turns or stopping at the lights. I just remember the overwhelming sense of dread that settled over me as I pulled into the parking lot and looked up at the building where I'd once lived. The windows were dark, there was no sign of life. It looked abandoned, a relic of a past that no longer existed. I used my key to let myself in. The apartment was a disaster. The clean, orderly space I'd seen a few weeks ago was gone, replaced by a chaos of empty bottles and discarded clothes. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the light. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and stale food, and there, slumped on the couch, was Laura. She looked terrible. Her hair was matted, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She was clutching a half-empty bottle of wine, her knuckles white. When she saw me, she didn't move. She just stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock and shame. "Jake," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Marcus called me," I said. "He told me you were in trouble." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Marcus, of course. He's always been a good guy, hasn't he? Always trying to fix things. Too bad he couldn't fix what he broke." I walked over and took the bottle from her hands. She didn't resist. She just let me take it, her arms falling limply to her sides. I set the bottle on the table and sat down on the edge of the couch, not too close, but close enough that she knew I was there. "What are you doing to yourself, Laura?" I asked. My voice was softer than I intended. It was the voice I used to use when she was upset, the voice that always made her feel safe. It felt strange coming out of my mouth now, like a relic of a different life. "I don't know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything anymore. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't stop thinking about what I did. I ruined everything, I ruined us, and I don't know how to live with that." I wanted to reach out and hold her. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that we would figure it out, that everything would be fine, but I couldn't. I couldn't lie to her, not after everything she had done, so I just sat there watching her fall apart, feeling a strange mix of anger and grief and something that felt a lot like love. "You need help," I said finally. "Real help. You need to talk to someone, Laura, a professional. You can't do this on your own." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Are you going to leave me again?" "I don't know," I said, and the honesty of it hurt. "I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I can't watch you destroy yourself, so if you want me to stay, you have to get help, you have to try." She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay," she said, "I'll try, I promise I'll try." The next few months were a slow, painful crawl toward something resembling normal. Laura started seeing a therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice who specialized in relationship trauma. I didn't go with her, it wasn't my place. But I made sure she got to her appointments, and I checked in on her regularly, and I tried to be the support system she so desperately needed. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to scream at her, when the anger bubbled up and threatened to consume me. But I held back because I knew that wasn't going to help anyone. I was learning to let go, to release the grip of the past and look towards something new. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Marcus, on the other hand, was a ghost. He had tried to contact me a few times, but I had ignored every attempt. I didn't have anything left to say to him. The friendship was over, dead and buried, and I didn't want to dig up the corpse. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved across the country to Seattle, where he was trying to rebuild his life. I hoped he would find what he was looking for. I hoped he would be happy, but I didn't care enough to find out for myself. One evening, about 6 months after everything fell apart, I was sitting on my small balcony, staring at the city skyline, when my phone buzzed. It was Laura. We had been talking more regularly, testing the waters of a new kind of relationship, one that didn't involve the weight of our past. She was doing better. The drinking had stopped, the therapy was helping, and she had started working again, a small freelance design business that seemed to give her purpose. She was still fragile, still healing, but she was no longer the broken woman I'd found on that couch. "Can I come over?" she asked. "I have something I want to tell you." My heart raced. I didn't know what to expect. I told her yes. When she arrived, she looked different. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a calmness that seemed to radiate from her. She sat down on the chair across from me, her hands clasped in her lap. "I want to tell you something," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. About what I did, about the person I was, and I realized that I can't change the past. I can't undo the pain I caused you, but I can tell you the truth, the real truth, not the excuse I gave you that day, not the story I told myself to make it easier, the truth. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. When I cheated on you, she said, her voice steady, it wasn't because I was lonely, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because I was broken. I was so broken and I didn't know how to fix myself. So I reached for the first thing that made me feel whole, even if it was wrong, even if it destroyed everything I loved. I used Marcus like a drug. He was a band-aid for a wound I didn't even know I had, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to be honest with you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to ask for help. I'm sorry I hurt the only person who ever truly loved me. She was crying, but there was a clarity in her tears that hadn't been there before. It was the release of a burden she'd been carrying for months, the catharsis of finally telling the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I don't even know if I've forgiven myself, but I wanted you to know that I see it now, I see it clearly. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be a better person, not for you, for me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying, I'm really trying. I sat there absorbing her words. The anger was still there, but it had faded, softened by time and distance. In its place was a strange, unexpected peace. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive her. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. But I knew that she was trying, that she was fighting to become someone better, and that was more than I could have asked for. I appreciate you telling me that, I said finally. I'm glad you're getting help, I'm glad you're okay. I'm not okay, she said, a small smile playing on her lips, but I'm getting there, and I think that's good enough for now. I looked at her, this woman I had loved, this woman who had betrayed me, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, it was something else. A recognition that we were both just broken people trying to find our way, that the love we had shared was real even if it had ended in disaster, that we could still be in each other's lives just in a different way. My dad's voice echoed in my head. The world doesn't owe you a thing, it's a hard, cold place. I had learned that lesson the hard way, but I had also learned something else, something my dad had never taught me. I had learned that even in the coldest, hardest places, there was still room for healing, there was still room for hope. And as I sat there with Laura, watching the sunset over the city, I realized that I was going to be okay. It would take time, it would take work. But I was going to be okay.
সেই বন্ধু যে দিল না রে আমার প্রেমের দাম, কইলজা কাইটা লেখি আমি আমার বন্ধুর নাম। সেই বন্ধু যে দিল না রে আমার প্রেমের দাম, কইলজার মাঝে রইল স্মৃতি, বন্ধু আমার নাই। বন্ধুর লাগি এখন আমার কইলজা পুরে যায়। কইলজা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম, বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলজা কাটার নাম। কইলজা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম, বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলজা কাটার নাম। ভিতর জায়গা দিলাম কইলজা কাটিয়া, প্রেমের ব্যথায় গেল হায় রে কইলজা মাটিয়া। মনের ভিতর জায়গা দিলাম কইলজা কাটিয়া, প্রেমের ব্যথায় গেল হায় রে কইলজা মাটিয়া। কইলজার আঘাত মনে জমা বলতে পারি না, বন্ধু আমায় গেল ভুলে কইরা চলো না। কইলজা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম, বন্ধু আমায় দিল না রে কইলজা কাটার নাম। কইলজা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম, বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলজা কাটার নাম। কইলজার মাঝে নামলে কিয়া করলো বেইমানি, কইলজা কাটার ভালোবাসায় জন্য চোখের পানি। কইলজার মাঝে নামলে কি কলজা কাটার ভালোবাসায় জন্য চোখের পানি প্রাণের বন্ধু দিল আঘাত আমার কলিজা কলজা কাটার ভালোবাসার কান্না হলো ভাই কলজা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কলজা কাটার নাম কলজা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমায় দিল না রে কলজা কাটার নাম